Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. For today's Industry Insight, we have a really good topic. We're going to be talking about the debate regarding refunding video games. This is going to be based on the post over on Game Wisdom, which you can find below. Now, refunding games, I know we've talked about this previously, especially with the rise of digital games. But over the last few years, especially since about 2015, things have certainly heated up. As you know, in 2015, Steam enacted their first really big policy regarding refunding digital games. When we talked about this last time, when it came to buying and selling digital games in the United States, it was always treated as you essentially licensing this game. So it wasn't direct ownership, meaning that you couldn't return it, you couldn't sell it, trade it, anything like that. Now, of course, the laws in Europe were different regarding those matters. In 2015, Steam and Valve basically put together a policy for refunding games. The rules are very simple. You can return any game, no questions asked, as long as you have less than 2 weeks since you bought it, and you have not played the game for more than 2 hours. As long as you meet those two conditions, you can return just about any game, from a game that you bought for $1 to $50, $60, and so on. Now, this only counts for games that you bought on Steam, obviously. Now, when this was announced, a lot of indie developers were basically saying doom and gloom. This would be the end of them. People would just buy their games and then quickly return them, and all that. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. But the recent announcement about, I think it would be 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more than that, that kind of started this discussion again, was Microsoft thinking about offering a Netflix-style subscription or refund kind of policy for XBLA games. Now, what makes this very important and why we're discussing this now is that this is the first time that a console maker is thinking about adding a refund policy for digital games. Again, when we talk about ownership and such, this is usually considered when it comes to physical copies. We mentioned the first sale doctrine, the second-hand market, etc. So Microsoft basically giving people the option of returning games or returning digital games is a very big deal, and why I wanted to talk about this debate today. Now, when it comes to the debate about refunding games, from the post, there are two big sides. We have the consumer, and of course, we have the developers. Now, when it comes to the consumer side, I am definitely for refunding games or having some kind of refund policy in place. As we've seen, especially over the last few years with the explosion of games from the indie scene, there are a lot of great games out there, just as there are a lot of not so great games. We've talked about games that are clones, asset flipping, and games that have managed to circumvent greenlight and such to get on there. And without having protection, consumers are basically left without any option if a game they buy turns out to be a clunker or they simply can't run the game. And having these kinds of protections in place is a very big deal in order to get people to buy these games. Now, with that said, of course, we've seen some major examples of this in play over the last year or so. Batman Arkham Knight, when it was originally released on the PC, was so buggy and ran into so many problems that it led to just basically Steam saying anyone can return the game, and it was actually taken off of the storefront due to problems. When the No Man's Sky debacle happened last year, Steam and Valve also introduced again just, you don't want this game? Refund it. We don't care. So many people complaining. It was just basically just a mass exodus from the game. And that is important to give consumers the option for. Because if you don't give them that, then they're not going to be willing to try out new games. Or more specifically, try out games from developers that they haven't heard of. This is very similar to what we've been talking about with crowdfunding and Kickstarter. All it takes is for one project that you back to completely fail to just throw away any and all trust you have with kickstarting and crowdfunding. The same goes for early access. How many people do you know have said that, well, this game that I bought on early access didn't work, so now I'm not going to buy any games on early access? Without giving the consumer protection, it means that they're not going to be willing to trust in games and just trust to buy them in the future. Now, from the other side, things from the developer point of view, comes the argument about how this will essentially pigeonhole games. As we've talked about before, and in an earlier critical thought, I brought up this idea of a video game appraiser. Video games are not a set product. There is nothing that says what is or what isn't a video game. We've all seen the gambit, from 80 to 100 hour plus games like MMOs and RPGs, to 30 minutes to an hour long visual novel or quote unquote walking simulator games, and everything in between. What developers have said is that a blanket policy that covers everything doesn't really work because there is no blanket state for a video game. Now, of course, this complaint comes from a lot of the smaller indie developers who have focused on these smaller experiences. Your Gone Homes, Dear Esther's, Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and the like. Many of these games are built around a very short gameplay loop, sometimes even non-existent. You just walk around and, follow the story beats. Now, for these games, they may have like 4 or 5 hours to explore, but you're going to basically see what this game has to offer within maybe 5 to 10 minutes of play. And for the games that only have a few hours, it can be very easy for someone to just rush through the game in under the 2-hour period, get the full or mostly or partially full experience, and then return it and the developers out a sale. And again, this raises some very interesting points about what should or what shouldn't constitute a refund. The argument, of course, is if you eat 75% of your meal or you watch 2 hours of a 3-hour movie, are you entitled to a refund or to get your full money back? Some developers at the time of the Xbox announcement try to offer the idea of having it be percentage based. 25% of the game, if you go beyond it, then you're not eligible for a refund. But I'm sure for those of you watching this right now, you should pretty much be thinking like I do, and that's not going to happen. And the reason comes down to one simple fact. Valve doesn't want to manage these policies. They want an automated flat system that is as easy to understand for anyone, and that they don't have to worry about having people review each case on an individual basis. That's what the 2 hours is for. 2 hours, it's cut and dry. You go beyond it, you're not eligible for a refund. For a 25%, it becomes, how do you manage that? Do you put in the game, a progress bar that says, oh, you're about to cross a threshold, you stop now or you can't get a refund? It just doesn't work like that. And this is why it's going to become very interesting to see just how this kind of refund policy takes shape as we cross the line from PC to console. Obviously, as we know, if Microsoft does pull this off and a success, who's to say that Sony won't follow suit? And then maybe Nintendo will follow suit. And so on. Now, the other part about this I want to focus on for this industry insight goes back to, again, that very tricky topic of valuing video games. My allergies are starting to bother me, so I'm afraid I'm going to be slurring my speech. As we said last time, there is no set elements of a video game, which makes it very hard to adequately price. Again, when you look at other products, it's easy to see how different pricing can affect things. If I buy a car for, let's say $10,000, if I'm going to see a car that's maybe $50,000 or $100,000, I'm going to expect that car to have a lot more features. But when it comes to a video game, pricing is all over the place. And while I was typing up the post, I did a little bit of Googling and I almost did a spit take in front of my monitor. As you know, I got the press copy for Outlast 2, and it's definitely not the game for me, as evident by an earlier critical thought. Now, of course, I got the press copy, so I didn't know how much it was going to cost. But before I looked it up, I was thinking to myself, I see this could be maybe $10, $15, something like that. It's a narrative experience, not much gameplay. And I was very surprised to see that on Steam, it's currently priced at $29 for Outlast 2. And as a point of comparison, Crusader Kings 2 is $39. And as you know, Crusader Kings is not a short game. That is something where, getting back to the idea of 2 hours, that we see things from the opposite end of the spectrum. You can't get a full experience of Crusader Kings or Europa Universalis or Solaris in 2 hours, maybe much less 5 or 10. Anyone who's played those games knows that 5 to 10 hours is simply like the preamble for you to try and learn them. But that's kind of the issue at play here. For $10 more, you have a game with massively a lot more replayability and content compared to as a few people on the channel here, a few fans have said, a running simulator. But that's a problem. There is no price distinction for a lot of these games. As a consumer, all you're going to see is this game is worth $30, this one's worth $40. Surely I should be getting somewhere near the same amount of value. But obviously that's not the case. And this is where the issue of pricing and refunding comes into play. The more money you have tied up in a single game, the more you're going to expect to get out of it. This is why, again, I'm just going by my own experience, I am far less likely to refund a game if I have it on discount compared to, say, if I spend $40, $50 on it. For instance, if I bought a game for $40 and within 40 minutes I'm getting annoyed at this game, I'm refunding it because I don't want to be stuck with $40 down or $40 in the red on a game that I'm not liking. But let's say I got that game on discount for $4 or $5. Then even though I may not like it, I may be more willing to stick with it just to see how things go. And this is where the issue of pricing really comes into play. Because again, there is no set standards for what a game should be priced at. This is why many people will say, well, if your game's $30, I'll wait for it to be $15. And as we've talked about before, the quote-unquote race to the bottom, which if we haven't done industry insight on that, we will have to do that eventually. But again, to wrap things up, and we're not covering this whole thing in this one video, I'm definitely for refunding games. And I do think that this may cause at least somewhat of a shakeup on the smaller end of the scale. Again, your visual novel games, your titles that are meant to be only a few hours long, and the price is built into the story. But again, and I'm sure this will cause some debate, how much is story worth it to you? Again, for games like Gone Home and Outlast 2, I can't see spending $20 or $30 on those games. But I know someone's about to comment probably that they found that to be worth it. They found the story to be interesting or unique enough to spend that extra money. But again, it's very hard to put a price tag on storytelling. When we can look at games like World of Warcraft, Diablo 3, Call of Duty, Battlefield, etc. that have extensive multiplayer modes that are designed to keep you playing for a long time, you can start to put that value in. But my question for you folks, how much is a good story worth it to you? And to wrap it up, we're going to go to a little bit of lightning round with some questions I want to ask you. So the first one is, what do you think about refunding games? Refunding digital games. Are you in favor of it? If you are, do you consider the rules or stipulations by Steam to be fair? Would you change things? And do you think that there should be a standard for video games? Do you think we should have a semi or partially itemized list of, if you want to sell your game, it must be this, 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 and this, or maybe it includes 2 of the 3 or 2 of the 4, or anything like that? Again, these are not easy questions to answer, and it's why a lot of the industry tends to ignore them. But as we move forward, especially with more digital games, and especially with the consoles really starting to embrace this, these are questions we will have to answer, and we will have to come up with a universal standard for. But with that said, thank you for watching today's Industry Insight. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to pitch future topics if you have one. With that said, be sure to check back daily for more great discussions on design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GW for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GW for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.